Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. So look who I have back with me. It is none other than Tom Goom, who is AKA the Running Physio. Tom is joining us today to give us his top 5 tips on how to treat and deal with runners. So if you're a new grad or a student and you're thinking, yeah, I want to hone on my tips for kind of looking at runners and treating runners to the best of your ability, there really is no better person than Tom, in my opinion. So without further ado, we're going to roll the video and get into those top 5 tips. Right, so Tom, first of all, many thanks for coming back on. To be honest, it has been far too long, in my opinion. How are you?
I'm good, thanks, James. Thanks for having me back. Yeah, it was good fun last time. So hopefully be useful for people this time.
Absolutely. So on that note, there's a link up here if you want to know more about Tom and his journey. Do check out the interviews for students and new grads that we did. This is going to be scary, Tom, probably 2 years ago now. So yeah, if you want
no way, 2 years.
It really is. So let's crack on. We are going to be talking about your top 5 tips for students and new grads in dealing with and treating runners today. And kind of to give people, I think, a bit of a glimpse into your world. I think you're probably really best known for one of your world famous courses, which is the Running Repairs Online. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit, because I think I've done the course in the last year, and it is probably one of the best courses I've been on. Just give us a brief overview of that before we start our top 5 tips, Tom.
Yeah, thanks, James. It's a course that's been in development really for over a decade now. So we started with the weekend version of the course, which Running Repairs, which we still do, and we've delivered all over the world. And in each time we did the course, we got brilliant feedback from people, and quite often they said, "Well, you could add this bit in about shoe selection, or you could add a bit more about biomechanics, or you could discuss this pathology." And we added more and more in until we reached a point where we could no longer fit it within the weekend. We also getting lots of people around the world asking for the course, that we couldn't take it to every location. So we decided to work with Clinical Edge because David Pope and the team got loads of experience in online courses, and build a kind of bigger course where we're not limited by time. And that's where Running Repairs Online was born then. An online version of the course is now 18 modules with about 30 hours of content in total. So we really feel that it's great for anybody that wants to treat runners, to help them build their assessment and treatment skills, learn how to do things like gait analysis and retraining. There's a lot in there for people to get their teeth stuck into.
Yeah, it is. It's and we're going to give the top 5 tips that you've got for treating runners. I mean, and that is scraping the surface. I myself, as a physiotherapist who specializes really in treating runners, I did the course, and it just added so much to my ability to treat runners. So yeah, we'll put the links in below. Do head over and check it out. But let's get started on your top 5, Tom. So number 1.
Number 1. Now, number 1 is be aware of serious pathology and how it presents. And the key example here is stress fractures in runners. Now, I've given these 5 tips some thought, and I kind of wanted them to be not just another like do this type tip, if you understand, just telling people what to do, but actually a little bit more where you might want to reflect and work on your learning. So I think a good thing for all of us treating any patients is to know what serious pathology looks like. And in runners, the one serious pathology that we will see in clinic and is often missed is stress fractures. So on average, they take about 3 months to diagnose because they're so easily missed. We've seen lots of high risk stress fractures misdiagnosed as tendon problems. So the things that would make me think stress fracture would be someone with a loading history, so that they've been doing a fair amount of their sport, because you don't really get them to get a stress fracture sat on the sofa. Someone that's having pain with weight bearing and impact, certainly if they're getting pain just with walking. If it's bony pain, if it's quite specific bony pain that you can bring on with palpation as well, that will also make me think stress fracture. Also, if you're finding that you're not bringing on the symptoms with other tests like range of movement tests, your tests of muscles, tendons, etc., it narrows the options down towards bone stress injury and stress fracture. And the final thing would be if it's an at-risk individual. So particularly someone who's had a previous stress fracture, maybe they've got low BMI, perhaps they've got some general health conditions that are affecting their bone health, should also make you suspicious. So number one, be aware of serious pathology and how to spot it.
Definitely, I can second that one. I've had a few, not loads, and a particular thing to add on that is, if you've got someone who's got a young, actually, I've had someone who has two young children. I think it was an 18-month-old and a 2-year-old, and when we sat down and had a chat, this chap, actually hadn't had a good night's sleep for around about 3 years. And as we know, sleep plays a big part of it. And that kind of ruled us down into what ended up being a stress fracture. Yeah. So big, important one.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And these are the things, as you learn about how things link together, you start to see just how important lifestyle factors and things are. It's easy to talk about things like social history and life load, but they do actually have a knock-on effect on tissue health. And we think with bone stress injuries, just as you say, sleep's quite important in bone recovery. So yes, it's something to be aware of, definitely.
Brilliant. Okay, right, moving swiftly on to number 2.
So number 2, again, this isn't just a quick, easy tip. It's more of a development area. And my number 2 tip here is learn about load management. If you can develop load management as a skill, not just with runners and athletes, but with your patients, it gives you a huge amount, because it helps you to find ways to settle their symptoms, because many patient symptoms will be related to load and how much they're working. Now, load management, I think, is often about problem solving. And I talked about this recently in one of our Facebook Lives about a plumber I used to treat with low back pain. So not a runner, but a plumber. And he used to carry this big, heavy kit bag around with him every day. And he weighed it. It was about 30 kilograms, this kit bag. And it was that really aggravated symptoms, carrying this bag everywhere. So we got him to bring the kit bag in and said, well, can we have a look? Is there anything in there we can get rid of? And he went through it, and it, like many people, I'm certainly guilty of this. It was full of old batteries and tools he hadn't used for years. And we were able to shed about half the weight of this bag. So that is load management. Like that's very pragmatic load management, but it then really helped his symptoms. So it's looking for ways in which you can problem solve and reduce the load on sensitive tissues, at least in the short term. And a way to do it that's a bit of an easy win, a way to do it that then really has a knock-on a positive effect for patients. So with our runners, it's going to be looking at their running distance, their running frequency, so how often they're doing it, their running speed, the training type. It may also be looking at time of the day. Stiff, irritable tendons don't really like running first thing in the morning. So it might be looking at adapting that. And sometimes it's actually about doing more. Load management isn't always about doing less. So we've had some runners that run once a week and do a 10K, and then they're sore for 3 or 4 days, and eventually it settles by next week, so they run a 10K again. And we've actually asked them to run more. We've said run 5K 3 times a week. So you're actually doing 15K a week, more than you were doing, but we're spreading it out over 3 runs at a level that feels manageable for you. And that's a lot about what load management is, I think. It's not stopping, but it's searching with each individual what feels manageable to you. How do we adapt what you're doing to that level?
Yeah, it's a massive one. One of my key points actually recent, in fact, it was on the running repairs online course that I did. There's a whole module on gait analysis, and it's it's a big topic, but I remember before doing the course, I'd actually become quite anti-gait analysis. With some of the research that moved us away from that being something that we should spend a lot of time on. But load management wise, it gave me some really good tools to tweak gait, even temporarily, and keep runners running. So it just gave me some really great tools. And actually, I've used it this past week with a patient, including their cadence and step rate, and managed to keep that patient running a certain distance during their rehab. So yeah, fantastic tip.
You could argue really that your gait retraining is another form of load management, because one of the key things with like managing load is we're looking at modifying activity while keeping it going wherever we can. We're not encouraging avoidance. And really that's what gait retraining is, isn't it? You're increasing someone's step rate maybe by 5 to 10%, and what that's doing is altering the load each time the foot strikes the ground. With each repetition of that loading cycle, the load is going to be slightly different. So it's just another form of load management, you could say, but it's probably one of the more complex forms because it involves the analysis, it involves trying to find cues to change the movement pattern. And I'm a big fan of the simple stuff first. I think gait retraining is really useful skill to know, but I think first and foremost, simple changes to people's training and to their recovery, like you've talked about with sleep, and that's one of the things I wanted with these 5 tips, as much as possible to them to be relatively simple. That a lot of the stuff that works with our patients actually, I think, is relatively simple, relatively straightforward, but it's just how we reason it through and make it work for each individual that is challenging, I think.
Yeah, and how we communicate that to runners as well, as I'm sure we'll probably have a chat about as well. Wonderful. Okay, so we're moving on to tip number 3.
Tip number 3 is develop your graded exposure skills. Now, this is another key area. And I think it's not just applicable to runners, it's applicable to many patients you see, which is developing the ability to gradually return people towards what they want to do. Now, with our runners, often this looks like finding out what their goal is. So what event have you got coming up, perhaps? What time do you want to do it in? And using the time we've got available to gradually increase them towards that. In runners, often it's about trying to work out how irritable they are and how much load they can tolerate, because that allows you to reason through how quickly they might be able to return to their sport. But this concept of graded exposure, of a graded return to activity, is so key. I'm working with an absolutely wonderful patient at the moment who actually their symptoms were not running, they were with sitting. And they were getting symptoms even with as little as a minute of sitting. So they stopped sitting altogether for many years. So what we needed to do was develop a graded exposure to sitting, and think through how to do that. And this can be something to do if you're a relatively new graduate or you're a student. Have a little think through, like problem solve. How might you do that? What would that look like in the real world, and how do we make it relevant to that individual? So in her case, it was about trying to make the sitting valuable. So it's not just, I want you to sit and that's it. It's okay, well, why don't you sit and have a cup of tea? Why don't you sit for your dinner? Why don't you sit socially? Why don't you sit in the car? And getting used to all those sitting environments, again, at a manageable level, and then gradually increasing towards their goal. And that person now is able, having not been able to sit for 5 years, is now up to about 7 hours of sitting a day, and recently decided to come and visit me in Brighton. They got on a flight, which they haven't been able to do for many years, and came to Brighton to visit me because they thought they wanted to enjoy that sitting and be able to do something with it. So graded exposure, it can be so powerful, and we don't necessarily pay it as much attention as other things because it's not necessarily as snazzy and as complex. But if you can develop those skills, it's hugely valuable for patients.
Definitely, yeah. And it's so broad, isn't it? That graduate. I love your example there. Really different. But yeah, graduated exposure it's just so important because ultimately we're finding out what a patient wants to do that they're struggling with, and getting them back to doing it, and avoiding doing it for a period of time is not necessarily the answer. So how do you go about getting them back to it?
Sometimes with runners, it comes down to a bit of maths, actually. And to give you an example, we had a gentleman recently who had some medial shin pain, and he was really keen to do an Ironman. And we really got on top of the shin pain quite quickly. So coming back to the load management, with bone stress injuries, you often have to go for pain-free, and we felt this was a bone stress injury. So we rested from all impact for a couple of weeks to let symptoms settle, and they really did settle. So we were able to then gradually bring him back into his running. But coming back to my point that it's about maths, he had 10 weeks left to build up to his peak mileage prior to this Ironman. And his goal was to get to 30K for his longest run. So we needed to build by 3K a week. It's just maths. We've got 10 weeks. We've got to go up to 30K. So that's exactly what we did, particularly with his longest run. We were making sure that we were building by about 3K a week. So initially, we literally went, right, Monday, you're going to run 1K. Wednesday, you're going to run 2K. Friday, you're going to run 3K. We went up by a K until we got to a point where we was running 10K. And then we made his longest run, the one where we really tacked on that distance each week. We got him there to the Ironman, completed the Ironman, danced a little jig as he crossed the line, which he sent me in a video, which I thought was quite good fun. But that is graded exposure. It's time bound by the event, but that really is often what it comes down to. So knowing how to do that and to guide a patient through it's so valuable. The more we can do it, the better, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Massive tip there. Massive. Okay, right. We're closing in now. So we are at the penultimate stage with tip number 4.
Tip number 4 is practice and adapt rehab exercises yourself. So if you've got 5 minutes even between patients, grab some kit, some resistance band, a couple of bits of weight, go and play with exercises. See how you can make them easier or harder. See where you feel it with the exercise. See which ones actually feel quite uncomfortable and awkward to do. Better still, get a group of your colleagues together, pick a muscle and work through what exercises you each like to use for that. It's something we do in running repairs. We've got to focus on glutes exercises, for example. But we've got lots of colleagues doing amazing things behind cubicles or in other clinic rooms. Get that opportunity to get together and say, well, what do these exercises actually look like for you? What is a good quads exercise in your book? How do you do that? Because you can learn so much from doing that. I'm sure even half an hour with a little group of colleagues, or even just experimenting with exercise on your own, you will come out with some new ideas, some new options. You'll know how they feel and how to tweak it to make it right, and you'll then immediately be able to use those with patients potentially.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really important one, and one I kind of struggled with at the beginning, actually, with exercise prescription. And another thing, if you're working as a new grad in the NHS as well, get yourself into any classes that go on as well, because there's some fantastic variations in there. I've now kind of started running the ACL rehab class, and there's the support staff that work alongside that have been doing it for many years. Got some phenomenal. We come in 1 week with something new, and variation is quite important sometimes for patients. So we don't necessarily need to overcomplicate things, but variation is quite good to keep interest. And as you say, we're working behind closed curtains half the time, so it's get together and see what each of you doing.
You can only really teach patients what you know. And I think that's the thing. If you only know quite a limited selection of exercises and you've only done them in a certain way, what happens is naturally they become the exercises that we gravitate towards. I know how to demonstrate this one. I'm confident with this one. I know how to load this up and progress it. So that becomes the exercise they're given, and isn't necessarily always the exercise they need. So the more you've got available to you, the more ways you know how to adapt them and play around with them, the better, really. And often doing that, you will come up with lots of ideas, lots of ways that you can progress and adapt, and then you've got lots more to offer then.
Fantastic. Right, we're hurtling towards the final tip, Tom. So we're going into tip number 5.
Tip number 5 is know the sport and the community that surrounds it. So if you want to treat runners, run. Do a race. Doesn't have to be a long race. Do a park run if you've not done one before, or sign up for a marathon if you haven't done one before. Because if you know the sport and the demands of the sport, and as I say, it could be any sport, not just running, it makes a huge difference in terms of how to manage an injury. You know what people are asking of their bodies, and you know the sport, and it comes across incredibly quickly. I think you probably agree with this, James. When someone knows the sport, it's immediately obvious that okay, this person knows what they're talking about. And the flip side, if they really don't know the sport, it can be, unfortunately, a little bit obvious too. So things like that, for example, I learned from doing my marathons is when you're marathon training, it's harder to rest than it is to run, because your body's like, oh, I want to run. Like, I actually found the days between runs really difficult because I was so used to doing so much running. So it helped me completely get I can see how it's so difficult for this person when I'm suggesting they do less and everything's in them is making them want to do more. And that's really useful to have that bit of empathy and insight. And even just the simple things with doing marathon training of, knowing how it tends to work. So it's normally about 16-week program, maybe up to 18 weeks. You're normally going to have a period at the end, usually 2 or 3 weeks, where you're tapering and reducing down prior to the event. These are all good things to know. You're usually going to hit peak long run distance of between 18 and about 22 miles. These are all good things to know, because then that's what your patient is exposing their body to. That's what you've got to prepare them for. And that's why the load management and the graded exposure is so important, because that's what you've got to do to get them to that start line and ultimately the finish line, really.
That's I think that's probably is a top tip out of these 5. They've been brilliant, but I think that is, for me, I think is, as you said, it's shone through so many times when I've seen patients. And we know runners do skip between physios if they don't like what they hear sometimes. I know I've done it before. And when they've been to someone at a physio that isn't a runner, who doesn't understand running, it's been really big. It's a big deal for runners. And I think that's quite key. But yeah, I think knowing the sport I think there's some research, Tom, you'll be able to tell me maybe more, but on they looked at who do runners listen to most when it comes to injury and advice on things like that. And it wasn't physios or health professions or even magazines or articles. It was other runners. I'm pretty sure that's right anyway.
Yeah.
And so if you
right.
can be both,
Yeah.
if you can be a physio and a runner, then you kind of got it in the bag.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, working together with you, James, people listening in might not know, but obviously you helped us develop the training plans that we use on Running Repairs Online, because, you know the sport really well. You know the coaching of the sport really well. You know the language that goes around it. That's the thing. There's a language with sport. There's terminologies that get thrown about, negative splits, cross training, all the various different little terms that get thrown around that you need to kind of know and understand. And if you know the sport, you do the sport, you will certainly know and understand it.
Yeah, it is a big one. And I think running is important. It's quite easy, I think, relatively easy to get to know the sport. And as you say, get yourself out, do a park run, do a race. But there are other sports that I know I come across that I don't know. And I usually hold my hand up quite quickly to patients and say, actually, you know, I don't know that sport. Can you demonstrate that movement? What does that row look like in that particular boat that you're doing and things like that? So, you know, that's that element. But I think with running, you can expose yourself to it as a therapist. So it's worth it.
I'm the same with other sports. My synchronized swimming knowledge is really not what it was.
No, you've let that go a bit, Tom, have you?
I have definitely, but yeah, it's a good thing to do, and it's a fun thing to do. You know, get involved in the community of the local community of your sport is also a great way to get to actually meet people who ultimately will often come and see you because they know that you know the sport. You know, it's a great way of actually attracting runners and the people that you might want to treat to your clinic.
Definitely. Wow, 5 absolutely mega top tips there, Tom. But I think we've got a bit of a surprise. Have we got a surprise? Yes, we have. Here we go. We've got a bonus tip. All right, Tom, fire away.
So my bonus tip is be active in your learning needs, especially when it comes to CPD. Don't just get what you're given. Go out there and look for the type of CPD that you need in your development. Now, to clarify what I mean by that is that at the moment, the internet will give you lots of different learning opportunities, podcasts, video series, blogs, all sorts of great things. They're all very valuable. But what tends to happen is if you just let the internet provide for you in that way, you get fragments. So you might get a podcast on shoulder pain and then a blog to read on Achilles tendinopathy, and then a video on low back pain. And you don't really get your learning needs addressed in that way. And it doesn't form a cohesive whole to help you in your practice. So what you want to do is always stop and think, what do I want to know more about? What are my learning needs? And then go and look for it, and you will find that there is lots of great different resources out there to help you identify your learning needs. So it's a question of being active, identifying your learning needs and finding the resources rather than just passively receiving whatever the internet's firing at you.
Yeah. Tom, I think you may well have just taken that tip and just thought of me personally, because it is absolutely, I think it's something, you know, you have to be aware of quite a lot with what we're bombarded with at the moment. And it's great that there is so much out there, but at the same time, it can be a hindrance to, as you say, focusing on what we need rather than what the internet tells us is available. And you know, and I found myself spreading myself so thin, doing loads but not actually taking a tangible chunk of learning away that I can and change my practice with. So that's
it. And then, you know, for me, the joy of it, if you like, is that when you're doing that, you can then translate that knowledge into better results with your patients. For me, that's the buzz from it. When you've done that, you've sat down and you've really learned about a topic, and then you've got a patient you're working with, and you can see that new learning making a difference to them. That's the win point for me. That's what I really enjoy. And it is a bit more difficult to do that if you're just getting fragments of things, because you're not really getting the whole picture to know enough to actually then translate it into your practice, I think.
I think it's a big one, especially for students and new grads. But I think all the way through your career, you can fall victim of that, just purely with the environment that we're in these days, of the fantastic resources and wide variety, but maybe a bit too much all the time.
Yes. And that you're learning there's always learning needs at every single different stage of your career. I still have learning needs that I'm working on, and I think I always will have, and that's a good thing, because then you're continually developing and becoming a better clinician, and then being able to offer more for your patients, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Tom, just a tremendous thanks for joining us on the channel today. It's been invaluable. I think those 5 well, 6 top tips are really, really useful. And again, I think just for everyone watching this, do head out down to the description below and click on the link for the link to Tom's running repairs online. It tremendously helped me. And as I say, I don't really promote courses on the channel, but when I see something that I think is useful and good and a genuinely worthwhile for certainly for new grads, I think I really want to let you guys know about it. So do head down and click on that link. And also, I would advocate for getting people to get in contact with you, Tom, on Twitter. Follow you on Twitter. Reach out to Tom. He is one of the most approachable physios out there, and so I commend Tom for that as well. He's been a tremendous help to me over the last few years, and for any students and new grads, he's someone who you do want to connect with. He's a top bloke and a fantastic physio with a lot of knowledge, as you'll see. So thank you, Tom, and everyone head down to the link below. Any last words, Tom?
Thank you very much, James. Very, very kind of you. Thank you.
All right, Tom, enjoy the rest of your evening. And to everyone out there, if you haven't done so also, I'm going to have to say it, hit the subscribe button below. Keep watching. We've got loads of content coming your way for students and new grads. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next video. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.